Hello there. So, I'm Rhonda Y. Williams, and I'm going to start us off with an espresso shot, which is a bit of inspiration before our main brew. So, leaders, ask yourself this: are you engaging in conditional civility? Are you shifting or allowing incivility based on the actions of others? Perhaps when someone misses a deadline, speaks negatively about you, even in the virtual world or social media space. So here's the thing: civility should not be a conditional choice. It's not about reacting to the actions of others. It's really about who you choose to be in every minute of every day. So, how would you rate civility in your workplace on a scale of 1 to 10? As leaders, we have the power to set the standard for respect and kindness, regardless of the external circumstances. Let's commit to unwavering civility, fostering an environment of respect, inclusion, and decency, no matter the challenge. That's today's espresso shot, and I hope you're ready. So grab your cup and let's get ready to lead above the grind. All right, great day, everyone. Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Coffee with Rhonda Show, your cup full of inspiration, revelation, and wit for today's savvy leader. We are excited to have you join us today for this is season 9, episode 109. And I can't even believe there's only one episode remaining in this season next week. So, you all are also about a part of making history if you're here watching today. But I'm not going to talk about it today. I'm going to wait till next week. So if you want to know the great news, you got to tune in next week. So before we introduce our co-hosts and our guests, a couple of housekeeping things. Tune into our YouTube channel, subscribe. You can do that at coffeewithrhondashow.com. And then also take a moment right now, if you're watching live or on the replay, stop, like, and share this video. I promise you there is something in this conversation that someone else will want to hear. With all that being said, my name is Rhonda Y. Williams, and I'm your host for this show. I am what I like to call an RSOL, or a recovering stressed out leader. And that is because in my days of corporate leadership, I've carried my share of stress. And you know what? I understand there's a different way. There's a better way. And I encourage everyone now to lead with a more modern, aware style of leadership that fosters that inclusivity and respect and well-being for all. So if you want to learn more about the work that I do in the world, you can visit atgleadership.com. So today, in honor of our conversation, I have my EQ cup, and it says EQ keeps me in control. You can't quite see it, but there's a little brain there. It's all about that for me. So that's me. I've got coffee with a little bit of pumpkin spice and cocoa mixed in my cup, and it's delicious. So that's what's happening with me. Let's introduce our co-host joining us. By the way, Marae, if you're out there listening, we miss you. Marae is on vacation in Japan. Check out her Instagram feed, and it is absolutely amazing. So good morning, Roz.
Good morning. Bringing you greetings from the cold state of Florida. Can you believe that I'm saying cold? It was in the 40s. I had to put on a coat. Knocked the mothballs off. But anyway, I'm Roz Jones, the CEO and owner of Jacksonville's Best Caregivers, where we help expand the life of your loved one. Why do we do it? We do it to help the caregiver to reduce that SOS on their journey, which is being stressed, overwhelmed, and providing safety and security. When you can't do it all, you give Roz Jones a call. And I'm excited about today's conversation. And on our next break. I'm gonna get my coffee cup.
That sounds great. Okay, Ross, thank you. And so I want to introduce our special guest for today. We're going to have an amazing conversation with Sejal, who is the CEO of Train Extra. But let me go into telling you a little bit more about her because she is on a mission to educate and empower people to create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. I want to see that world so badly. Sejal, Sejal is a former attorney, a former employment law attorney, a two-time TEDx speaker, and founder and chief civility officer at TrainX, a minority and woman-owned training consulting firm, where she helps leaders create positive, safe, and respectful workplaces through customized training and coaching. She's also the Chief Culture Officer at Nobody Studios, a venture capital firm that aims to create 100 compelling companies. She's responsible for cultivating a people first culture at Nobody Studios. So, Sejal, welcome to the coffee table. I'm so excited to have you here. Did I miss anything? Anything you want to add? And then tell us what's in your cup.
No, you hit it all. Thank you for that warm welcome, Rhonda, and great to see you, Roz. I'm so glad to be here at the coffee table with both of you.
Thank you so much. Tell us about Sejal, where are you joining from?
I am in the San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California.
Awesome. So it's very early, and my gratitude to you for getting up so early in the morning to join us. And do you have your cup with you? And what's in your cup?
I do. I have my cup right here. That's my son. And that's my little cat right there. And I have the Starbucks holiday blend coffee going on this morning.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Nice. I love it. Very cool. All right. So if you're out there and you're watching, tell us where you're dialing in from and what you have in your cup also. So we're going to dive into our conversation today. And today's conversation, just for those of you tuning in, we may do it a little bit shorter today, but you all know how we do. Just sort of roll with it. It'll all be great. And so I want to start with your opening quote. I asked all of our guests, Sejal, to share an opening quote that is meaningful and impactful for them. So I'm going to put this up. I'll read it really quickly, and for those listening later on audio, and then I'll ask you, Sejal, to talk to us about this quote and what it means and why it's important for you. So the quote says, "Civility is the glue that binds the culture together, unity and understanding." So I love that. Sejal, tell us a little bit more about this quote. Why this quote? And then what even is civility? I'm not sure we all have the same understanding.
No, and that's a great way to start our conversation. As you know, during our prep, we've talked about, I'm super passionate about diversity and inclusion. I've done employment law my whole career. And when I decided to go out on my own, I really wanted to pick a focus area where I can combine all of my experience. And one of the things that I found was that, if we want to get to true inclusion, where everybody feels that sense of belonging, then the first thing that needs to happen, obviously, we need to make systemic changes, and we need to address, the racism and all of the other isms that exist at the core level. But aside from that, the area I chose to focus on was civility, because if people who are different from each other can't even get to a point where they expect civility in their interactions with people, right, we can't even move the needle towards getting towards inclusion. And so as I started doing the work, I like the word civility because it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and when I first started my company and I called myself the Chief Civility Officer, I actually had a mentor reach out to me, someone that I respect a lot, and said, "Are you sure you want to call yourself the Chief Civility Officer? That word can rub people the wrong way, And they said, "How about Chief Respect Officer instead?" And I said, "No, because civility is way more than respect." Right. So I use a definition of civility in my workshops when I do my trainings by Dr. Cynthia Clark. And she's a world-renowned expert on helping to create healthy workplaces. And the way she describes it is, yes, you need to have an environment where there's dignity and respect for everybody, right? We have to value each other's worth as human beings. That's the starting point. But on top of that, there needs to be other things. So you have to, when there's going to be times when you're working with people who are different than you, and we're all different from each other. We all have different lived experiences that we may not see eye to eye, right? And in those situations, we have to not only treat each other with dignity and respect, but she goes on to say that we also need to make sure that we come into those situations with an intention to reach common ground, right? So when you're working for an organization, what is that shared common ground, those shared values, right? That we have to come together as leaders, as a team, with that intention to reach that shared common ground. And also that we have to make time for each other. We have to be present, which goes in the face of everything that we've been taught, right? We've been taught, we've got, most people that are joining us today, they spend an hour with us, they're going to have 50 emails that they need to respond to. So if someone says or does something to you that makes you feel uncomfortable, a lot of times people don't deal with those situations. They just say, never mind, it'll go away. That behavior will change. But what we know is it never changes. It only gets worse. It doesn't get better until you address it. And so I like the intentionality behind civility. I like the fact that we have to make time for each other, that we have to be present, and that we have to empower people with the skills so that they know how to resolve these situations and move forward together as a team. So that's what I decided to focus in on, the civility.
So, Sejal, I love the definition that you're using. And I love that it goes beyond dignity and respect. I had not heard included in civility that idea of reaching common ground, right? So it's not just about, okay, yes, I respect you, but where is that place where we can come together? So Roz, after we say good morning to a couple of folks, I want to get you to respond to that definition of civility, because I think it gives us a lot to think about in terms of how we interact with the world. So Regina's out there. Good morning, Regina, San Antonio. I have coffee in my cup. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us. And if you all are out there, think about how civility impacts you, right? In the workplace every single day. I'd love for you to add some of that in the conversation. Gwen is out there. Hey, Gwen, great to see you. Good morning. Listening from Cupertino. Good old water in my cup. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining. So, Roz, your thoughts on, we got one more out here.
Okay.
Hey, Archana, thank you so much for joining.
India.
Good evening from India.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. So, Roz, give me your thoughts on what we're going to be talking about in this definition of civility.
Her definition really intrigued me, because I never thought of that in that light, to be able to accept people's differences and then implement them into our space, and then to respect them. And so that's something that when I was sitting here, I was like, oh my God, I never thought about this. It never even rang a bell.
Yeah.
But in order for us to be productive, we have to implement this. There is no way for us to be successful if we're only talking about, well, okay, I'm going to say, I can't pronounce your name, Lady S. I'm going to call you Lady S for today. So, Lady S, if I don't accept your differences and understand some of your thoughts and your processes, how can we work together? So that means I'm prejudging. I'm being biased. Okay. So, a lot of times people always say, Rosin, you got big eyes. Do you have, some kind of disease? No, I just have big eyes. I just have a big head and big eyes. I'm just using that as an example. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we're prejudging instead of sitting down and taking the time and learning about one another and understanding why they may go left versus me going right. But we're still getting to the end goal the same way.
Yeah.
And now I have a different view of how I can still get to Atlanta through Lady S's eyes and through her journey.
Right.
So understanding her journey is important for us to be able to be understanding each one. You don't have to go back to birth to understand the journey, but just to understand part of her journey will then help me understand and respect more who she is.
Yeah.
why she does things the way that she does it.
I love that,
That's
Roz.
Ross Jones talking.
Yeah, I love that, Roz. So, so good. So, Mom joined. Hey, Mom. Good morning, Rhonda. Roz. I'm here today with hot white grape cherry cocktail. I always have to slow down to read what Mom has in her cup because it's always something delicious and yummy. I'm excited to learn something from Sejal this morning.
Well, I just got mine. A
Oh,
friend of
all
mine
right.
was really nice to fix me some ginger tea, and I got honey. So
Nice.
I'm in compliance.
Very nice. So, Sejal, when we think about civility in the workplace, please make this real for us because as I was preparing for our show today, I think workplaces do a great job. And as a former employment attorney, I'm sure you've seen a lot of this, right? They do a great job with the big stuff, right? Discrimination and
Mhm.
harassment and, sexual harassment. And they cover the big ones. But what about the other aspects of civility that shows up in our workplace that we don't really think about as civility? Can you give us some examples of how this may really play out in the workplace?
Absolutely. And you really hit the nail on the head because that's what was frustrating to me. As an employment law attorney, I was getting called in after the fact, right? So there was a complaint now, there's a lawsuit. Now I'm coming in. And so I've seen organizations from that legal side of it where I've seen what they do once it's too late. And I've done a lot of workplace investigations. So I've got to see the nuts and bolts. And I saw companies, and this was really what led me to starting my own company, Train Extra, in 2017, is that organizations spend a lot of money, a lot of resource, Rhonda, like you said, on issues of how do we prevent that illegal behavior of harassment, that discrimination, retaliation. So of course that's important. And we want to make sure we do that important work. But there's a lot of behaviors that we all know that goes on in organizations that doesn't necessarily rise to that level of being illegal, right? So you have your rude behaviors, your insensitive behaviors. Don't forget microaggressions that happened from what Roz said, bias, right? So bias, you have these hidden biases, your unconscious biases, and now you're not aware of them. So now you're saying and doing things that could be harmful, and we call those microaggressions. So how are we training people? How are we educating people on how to deal with those situations? And that's where I was like, wait a second, those behaviors, those rude, those insensitive, those microaggressions, even your abusive conduct, right, which isn't illegal necessarily in all of the states, unless it rises to the level of being harassment. So there was this whole range of behaviors that are happening actually more frequently, that are more common in organizations that weren't being dealt with by organizations, right? So I felt that companies really weren't taking the steps to properly train their managers and their employees to foster a culture of dignity and respect, of civility. And so these behaviors were going on, they were continuing and continuing. Nobody knew how to address it, or they just tolerated it. And pretty soon it was becoming the normal way that we do things around here.
Right.
Right. And then it's the doorway to that toxic environment. So that was a huge frustration for me is in that situation, because I felt that, look, I felt conflicted because number one, if an employee had been treated unfairly, whether it was illegal or not, I was coaching the managers to say what they should have done and what they shouldn't have done. Right. And a lot of times they were coming back and saying, I never even knew that. Nobody's ever talked to me about how to respond to a microaggression or what should I say in that situation, right? So I found that there was just a huge lack of awareness. And then we can even talk about the bias, the unconscious bias conversation. I mean, that was such a huge lack of awareness and ignorance on what unconscious bias is and how that impacts us when we're in the workplace. And so when I was dealing with these cases and I was talking to these managers, I realized that they were missing the mark on creating what we need is psychological safety in our workplaces, right? So there were so many different things that I was seeing. Even if you think about how the complaint process is set up, right? I've seen so many cases where an employee files a complaint, and I'll just use an example, right? One that I saw frequently was employees being harassed because of their weight, right? Now, weight is not a protected characteristic in any law, right? There might be some city laws. I know city of San Francisco has a city ordinance that has weight and height listed as protected characteristics. But usually both on the state and federal level, weight is not a protected characteristics. So in these situations, an employee files a complaint with HR and says, I'm being harassed. And what HR does is they do an investigation and they conclude, well, this isn't a protected category. So there's nothing that we can do. This is what I was seeing back then. Right. And so they were basically leaving this employee out to dry and putting them back in this environment because it's not illegal behavior. Right. And so rather than having that mentality of let's punt it up to HR and have them deal with it, and then them saying we got to get the lawyers involved, I think it's better to empower employees, to empower the leaders to be part of the solution, to give them this script, to give them the tools so they can address these situations as they're happening. And then, of course, there are situations where you have to go to HR, where you have to get other people involved, right? We're not saying everything can be resolved one-on-one, but a lot of these situations could be if we provide the proper training. And that's really, again, the work that I do with Train Extra.
Wow. Love that. So, Roz?
I was going to ask a question. Because I'm having a situation at one of the places where I provide care. Mm-hmm. And how do you empower the employee to handle that micro aggression, and without going to HR and always seeming like, I'm a tattletale. I complain all the time. I'm a big girl. I'm grown. Truly, I'm grown. And I should be able to handle my own problems without running to tell my supervisor, without running to tell HR. I don't like stuff going that far. I feel like I should be able to talk to you. Honey, come here. Let me talk to you in the corner for a minute. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely, Roz. You should be able to. And that's exactly what I was seeing was that people just weren't, we can't expect people to know what to say and what to do. We have to teach them. And it has to be in line with your organization's core values, right? But so, for example, in my workshops that I offer on unconscious bias and microaggressions, first thing is, Roz, most people don't even know what a microaggression is or what unconscious bias is. So we have to start at the very foundational level, right, of explaining to people what these words mean, just like civility. Civility, I do this in my workshops. I ask people to put into the chat, how do you define civility? And you see all kinds of different answers. You ask people what a microaggression is, same thing. You're going to see all different kinds of answers. So the first step is really getting everybody on the same page as to how we define these things, right? And so once you define it and you clearly explain what that term means, so if we're focusing on microaggressions, defining what a microaggression is, giving people examples of what microaggressions look like, because they come in many different types of forms, right? Depending on your marginalized group, the type of microaggressions are going to be different. And if you're not part of that marginalized group, you're not going to be able to really understand it. So you have to help people see examples. So in my workshops, I show them videos. I show them video clips. We do breakout rooms. So we put people into rooms and they're talking about what a microaggression is. They're talking about what it feels like to be on the receiving end, right? And that's where those aha moments happen, where people can start to relate and understand each other. And then you give them the strategies of how to deal with those. So I give them an actual script of here's how you should say it, how you should address this situation. And so then you start getting this shared common language happening within an organization. So if I go to Rhonda and I say, hey, I would like to have a conversation with you, and I start using that script, she knows that I'm calling her in.
Right.
Because remember, we're on the same team. I'm not calling her out. I'm just educating her on why it's hurting or harming me. Right.
Okay.
So it's not
Hold
about
for a minute, Sejal. Because that term, calling her in.
Yes.
Calling her in. So we need to write. So I say all the time, I'm going to start a Coffee with Rhonda Show, dictionary or a reference sheet or something about the great terms that our guests use. Calling her in feels human. It feels empowering, and it feels like I care enough to bring you in rather than calling you and pushing you out. So thank you for that.
But also, too, I want to say this real quick because this is getting juicy. Because when you say call her in, now I'm allowing you temporarily into my private space.
Mm-hmm.
I'm allowing you in, so don't mess up. I'm just saying, don't mess up, or we can practice social distancing again. But that but that calling in, allows the other person to come in. And I'm hoping that when you call that person in, that they don't take advantage of it or misuse that against the person that's saying, hey, I want to talk to you. Because sometimes it can go the wrong way. Not all the time, but sometimes it can go the wrong way. I want to bring that out.
Yeah.
Well, and it can go the wrong.
Hold on one second, Sejal. I'm going to come right back to you. I want to say good morning to Beth. Hey, good morning, Beth. Thanks so much for joining us. Much needed conversation, ice water in my cup. And then Gwen also says, Sejal, spot on. On the one hand, people who experience inappropriate behavior don't know how to handle it, and yet they're afraid to go to HR. Training is definitely a good first step, elevating the human experience in the workplace. So yes, Sejal, back to you.
No, I was just going to comment on what Roz said. It is calling in, and if you don't do it in the right way, right? So calling in has to be done in a respectful, professional way. So calling out is when you're assuming, when you're shaming someone, when you're blaming someone, when you're judging somebody. That's not what we want to do, right? We want to call people in, because here's what we notice is that a lot of times when bad behavior happens in the workplace, incivility happens in the workplace, oftentimes it starts off with people who are actually well-intentioned people, but they're misguided or they lack awareness, right? So I don't know. I mean, I could probably speak for a lot of us. If I'm saying something, right, and it's coming from an unconscious bias, let's say, for example, here's a perfect example. I did a training a few weeks ago, right? And I had a group of 30 people, and there were men and women in that group. Now, referring to that group as you guys could be offensive to the women in that group. Now, I don't have intention to offend those people. I'm there training those people, right? But occasionally it slips out when I say you guys. Now, I caught it right away and I apologized and I moved on. But let's say somebody was offended by me using the term you guys, right? Now, it doesn't matter what my intention is. The intention doesn't matter. Whether I intended to harm them or not doesn't matter. What matters is that they were harmed. And so if we want to eliminate harm in the workplace, we have to do more call-ins. Because again, my intention wasn't to harm that person, but it still resulted in harm. So I would want to know if I'm saying things or doing things that are harming other people in the workplace, I would rather know about it than not know about it and continue to engage in that behavior that is harming someone. Mm-hmm. So when I do my workshops, I tell people, look, when you're being called in, consider it a gift. It's a gift to you because now, guess what? You are on notice. Now I'm on notice that I'm harming this individual. And it's my responsibility, and I have to be held accountable to make sure I change my behavior. Now, if I've been using the word you guys for 30 years, you have to give me some grace, right? I might slip up again. So if Roz calls me in and accidentally a month from now I use you guys, she shouldn't be breathing down my neck to say, I talked to you about this, unless she feels like she needs to have another conversation with me. But it should also create that opening for her to say, hey, Sage, I talked to you about this before. And again, and we should be able to talk that through with each other.
Right.
Unless she feels that I'm doing it intentionally. And Roz, I agree. There are situations where people will do it intentionally. There's always a few bad apples in every bunch. But here's what happens. The beauty of doing the call-in is now you've put that person on notice. Right. You've done your part, and now we have to hold that person accountable. So if you felt that I was doing it intentionally, now the next step would be, if you feel comfortable to address it with me again, you can. And then you add a consequence to it. To say, Sejal, I've had this conversation with you before. I've explained to you that it harms my ability to do my job, let's say, for example. And now you're on notice. And now you're doing it again. If this happens again, I'm going to have to go to HR. now you put a consequence to it. And if it happens again, now you follow that process, right? So there are times where you have to escalate the situation. Absolutely. But I think a majority of the situations that were landing on my plate as lawsuits, I felt that if they would have been properly handled from the beginning, they would have never turned into a lawsuit.
Right.
But you know what they'll say, Jill, and Rhonda, please, I'm on
Yeah.
the roll this morning.
Because you're in with this.
We have to also retrain the mindset about being called in, because remember now, when we were in school and we got called into the principal's office, we got called up to the teachers, it was always bad. It was never anything good. Seldom. When I say seldom, I mean, well, you know, I was one of the children that went to the principal's office, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So our mindset has to be, our brain and our emotions and everything, it's spirit, body, everything has to be retrained to say, okay, just because someone is calling your name or ask you to step into their office, it's not always negative.
Right.
It could be to get your feedback. It could be to, you know, I need you on a project. And so we have to remember now, we're taking all that training that we had for the first 12 years of our lives, being called into the principal's office, and now it's coming into the workplace. And I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, no, that's good, Roz. And I'm going to take us down this road because Joe has said something here. She says the leader, the very top of the ladder, must believe and have total buy-in in order for this to successfully create a safe and healthy culture. And Sejal, I'll pass this to you, because what I often see with those leaders at the very top is it starts with these little tiny behaviors that we just start to accept. Disrespect is not just me looking at you and saying something rude. Disrespect is, okay, raise your hand or put a 1 in the chat if you have been in a meeting and there is at least 2 or 3 people who have their computer, they're looking down at their computer the entire time that the meeting is happening or that someone is speaking. That's disrespect. It's disrespectful to the group, to the leader, to say you cannot have my full attention. And when you as a leader allow those little elements of disrespect, then you end up on a slippery slope. Am I off base with that, Sejal?
No, that's absolutely true. I agree with that. It starts with leadership. Leadership has to be the role models. And that's a lot of the resistance I run into sometimes when, you know, even as an attorney, you know, it was so as I mentioned, I am an employment law attorney, but for the first 10 years of my career, I was actually representing leaders in cases dealing with harassment, discrimination. So I was a defense attorney. So I know the leadership and I know how leaders think. And, you know, it was very interesting. I'll make a point. You know, I've gone through discrimination and harassment in my life. So I've been on the victim side of that side. And now when I went to the other side, it became a total flip. Now I was representing people who were accused of discriminating and harassing. And I got to see bias and prejudice from a whole different perspective. And what I'll say in response to that comment is 2 things. One is that a lot of times leadership is engaging in behavior. They're well-intentioned. Okay, I'm going to put the bad apples aside for a second. A lot of the leaders I was dealing with were well-intentioned, but they were doing and saying things that were harming other people on their team, but nobody had called them in. Right. So they continue engaging in this behavior that now looks like intentional discrimination or harassment, where had we coached them properly and gave them the awareness of what they were doing, that would have never happened. That being said, because it's become normal in so many organizations, this type of behavior, you're right, we have to go backwards. And so I get a lot of resistance sometimes from leaders, you know, and what I do is I actively involve them in my training process. So I will say, let me just do a training with just the leadership team here so that we can see. I'll do a test run with all of you before we roll it out to everybody, because the trainings that I do is not just for leadership. It's for every single person in your organization. It's that foundational. And going right to, again, what Roz was saying, we have to retrain and show people what these definitions mean and change that mindset beginning with leadership. Because I'll tell you, if leadership doesn't buy in, and if they're not involved in this process, and they don't make it a top-down priority, it's not going to work. But it takes education. They don't understand about the consequences of incivility. They haven't seen the research. They haven't seen the statistics, the case studies that demonstrate how incivility, no matter how minor it is, impacts employee morale, productivity, and overall bottom line. So having done that work and representing these leaders, I can make that case pretty easily to them about why it's so important to bring civility, not only as a training thing. I'm out there advocating to organizations to make civility a core value of every single organization.
Oh, I love that. So, so good. Really, really good. And you talk about this retraining, and you talk about having a plan. So I want to show your slide on having a workplace civility plan. And I want to ask you to to talk us through this, what this looks like, because Roz, this is something even that you can implement at your organization everywhere. I don't know many organizations that have a workplace civility plan. And so I think this is fascinating. So Sejal, talk us through a civility plan.
Yeah, no, many organizations don't have a civility plan. And this is, I call it the Civility Action Plan, CAP for short. And really, this is something that a framework that I've created based on just the research and the learnings that I've done. But really, what we're talking about is the first step is making sure that you have a comprehensive plan. It's not a once every 2-year training on civility that's really going to be what's going to work. You need to have a holistic plan around psychological safety. So there's a lot of things that go into civility, right? Conflict resolution, effective communication, how to understand what unconscious bias is, microaggression. So there's how to intervene as a bystander. So there's lots of different areas that you want to provide training on, right? And so not just training, but then reinforcing what we mean by civility. So really the first step is, again, going back to the C in my civility action plan starts with clarity, right? Again, giving everybody a definition of what civility means for your organization. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's getting everybody on the same page as to what we mean by civility. Then you want to make sure there's alignment, right? So you want to make sure that there's policies, there's standards in place, there's a complaint process that's not going to lead to, if it's not a legal issue, let's say it's a microaggression, we still want to have some sort of process that people can follow if they've tried to resolve the situation themselves and they're not looking for any kind of disciplinary action, but they still want that issue addressed. And that's lacking in a lot of different organizations. So you want alignment to make sure that everybody understands what to do in those situations. And you have to get very specific, right? You want to give people examples of what are the behaviors and attitudes that are encouraged, that are expected. But also you want to make it easy for people to understand, how do you navigate? So I'm a huge fan of giving people scripts to follow to prevent misunderstandings and conflicts, right? And you want to define expectations, really help people, give them concrete examples on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And then you have to make sure that you're consistent, right? This comprehensive plan has to be consistently implemented. So your leadership needs to understand what all the different facets are and what to do to handle complaints that come in. And then it's really about accountability. You have your clear definitions, but now we have to hold people accountable for their actions. And so that only way we can do that is everybody understands what uncivil behavior is and how to address those violations should they occur. And then the last thing is you want to make sure there's a feedback mechanism, right? You want to make sure there's feedback loops that you're, consistently getting from employees so that they can voice their concerns and let you know that there's areas that maybe we need improvement on. We're missing the mark in these areas. Let's address those before that lawsuit comes, right? So it's all very proactive, and there's money that needs to be spent. There's resources that need to be put in here. And this is where I think a lot of resistance comes from, is a lot of, companies are like, well, we're not big enough, or we know we have a good team, or we're bringing in high top skilled workers. And so we don't really need to have these conversations. And I'm like, no, you need to have this conversation in every single company, every single organization, regardless of size, regardless of where you're located, right? So that's a real quick summary of what the comprehensive plan should contain.
Really, really powerful, Sejal. Love that plan. And I was just thinking as you were speaking about just the little things that we do that violate that workplace civility as leaders without even recognizing it. So, for instance, um, I talk to my sons a lot and they tell me about situations happening at work. And there will be, I was on the schedule for this time and I looked at the schedule and it's now just changed, right? The schedule's just changed. Well, how respectful is that to your employee? And without a conversation, without saying, you may already have some things planned. Can you do this for us? But no, I own the schedule. And so you have to work when I say, right? I think it's one of the most basic elements of respect that a leader can show to their team is honoring their time and their schedules, right? So it's those little things. I see a comment here. I'm going to bring that in for us. Couple of really good ones. So Gwen asked Sejal where she can find the research that you mentioned.
So there's tons of research out there on there. You can look at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They have a lot of information. And actually, they put out a report in 2016 that it was like over 100-page report after a task force they put together about how the trainings that we've done to prevent harassment and discrimination for 3 decades have failed and why they don't work. And they're the ones that recommended that employers implement civility training. That was the reason why I started Train Extra. When I read that report, I'm like, boom, that's what I want to do. But there's so many different experts out there. Christine Porath is a leading expert on civility. She's constantly putting out information out there. There's, you could look on my website, Train Extra. I have a whole section called resources, tons of great information and resources on there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always seeking out good information to help organizations on how to bring civility into their organizations. So those are some good places. Again, Cynthia Clark has some good stuff out there as well. So there's a lot of research. And this is the beauty of this, is that now that we have access to all this stuff on the internet, you can really research and start implementing this stuff. And then, as always, you can always reach out to me and I'm happy to walk you through how to go about it.
Thank you, Sejal. Thank you for answering that question. So Joe said, supervisors are not consistently taught conflict resolution or to just open up the conversation that has potential conflict. So that inappropriate behavior continues, and practicing those conversations with leaders is critical. You have to model it. I see this often and I hear people say, I can't have that conversation. That's my manager, or that's this person, or they won't respond to it well, or that sort of thing. But you know what? We have to own a part of this. So Dr. Carlene says, yes, very true when you were speaking earlier. And then Gwen said, thank you for narrowing down the sources. Fantastic. So let's take a quick shift really quickly, because we're going to let Sejal go in just a few minutes here. She's got a busy day training on this very important topic. And I'm really excited about that, Sejal, because I think it's something that we need to continue to press into our modern workplaces that are constantly evolving. But we're going to do something fun. I want to do our top 2, because I want to learn something different from Sejal, aside from the brilliance that she's sharing with us. So we're going to share our top 2. So our top 2 question today, I'll give you the question and then we'll answer it right on the other side of this, is what are your 2 favorite breakfast cereals? So you can either go from current or past, because I know I'm a past kind of cereal girl. So I'll share the top 2 and we'll do that right after this.
Okay.
All right. So your top 2 favorite breakfast cereals. So Sejal, do you have yours?
I have my staples that I'm always bringing into the house. I love the Honey Nut Cheerios, and I love the Vanilla Flake cereal from Trader Joe's.
Oh.
Those are my 2. Yeah.
Is that kind of like Frosted Flakes?
It's kind of like Frosted Flakes, but it's got vanilla and almonds in there.
All right. Thank you for that, Roz.
Well, as I'm sucking on the peppermint, my favorite cereal is Fruit Loops, because I like the colors. Fruit Loops. And it says fruit, so my 7 fruits and vegetables are in the Fruit Loops, right?
Okay.
And my other one is Great Grains. I love the Great Grains. So those are my 2 favorites.
Oh my goodness. All right. So this is so funny. People always laugh when I say this, but my favorite cereals, and I don't do a lot now, but when I would eat cereal, I loved Raisin Bran.
Oh, yes.
Loved Raisin Bran, all
Yes.
those chewy little raisins. And then for me, the second one was very much like yours, Roz, but Tricks. Those little round puff balls, they were just delicious with all those fun colors, and it was just fun. So those are my two favorite cereals. So, all right. Well, thank you for that. So, because we're going to wrap things up pretty soon, let's do our coffee shot, and then we will come back and really start our wind down segment a little early here so that Sejal can participate in the whole show. So, all right. Hold up your cup, Sejal.
All right.
You're going to take a picture. Just look into the camera and smile. Got it. Okay. So that's fantastic. We're going to start our wrap up segment. And we're going to talk about, Sejal, in this segment, what we do is we say, what have we put in your cup today? And what have we put in your cup is really about what do you want people to take away from this conversation. So if you're out there and you want to share anything that we put in your cup, that's fantastic. And we'll talk about that. But before we do this, our coffee mix. So embedded in every intro of our music, there is a little funny at the end. So I don't know if this one was a little bit long, so I think you all might have missed it. So I got to show it because I love it. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, which comes from a famous quote. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure and yet still cannot find our coffee mug that we just had a day minute ago. Right? So if you haven't caught that, watch those intro and there's always a little bit of a funny in there. So start our wrap up segment and ask what's in your cup, and then learn where we can learn more about the work that Sejal is doing in the world and connect with her right after this. Okay, so Roz, let's start with you first. What have we put in your cup?
The part Sejal talked about with the call in and the definition of civility were the two most impactful things that she shared so far as I'm concerned. You know, this is just for my personal takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
And matter of fact, I'm going to take some of that information that she gave us, and I'm going to use it immediately with the situation that's going on in one of the places where I provide care. So I'll be able, I love this show because we can take this information and we don't have to ask permission to use it. We can just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And I say that every show. This show is really a PhD level of information. So Sejal, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roz, for that. A couple of things. First, Nancy says, I love that quote. Well, Nancy, feel free to use that quote or that image. I'm happy to share it. And then Mom said, Cheerios and Rice Krispies, because I like to add my own sugar and fruit. Those are her favorite cereals. All right. So, Sejal, what do you hope people take away from this conversation today?
Yeah, I would again advocate that organizations really consider making civility a core value and implementing the comprehensive plan that I talked about quickly here. And for anybody that's listening and wants to learn more about that or needs assistance with that, reach out to me. This is something that, in the last few years, especially, we've seen incivility skyrocket. We've had the global pandemic, we've had the Black Lives Matter movement, we've had multi-generational workforces, we've had rapid globalization. So there's been many things that have happened that literally from the time I started my company to now has caused incivility to skyrocket. And so, I call it the civility revolution. And so we really do need to shift and prioritize making civility a core value and empowering every single person in your organization to be part of the solution, right? It's not a one-person job. Everybody needs to understand it and do their part so that we can do better as organizations.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Sejal, where can people connect with you and learn more about the work you're doing?
Sure. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on there. Like I said, I'm going out of my way to find resources to help organizations on this topic. And then my website, trainextra.com.
Awesome. Well, I'll wrap things up with my last drop for today. And my last drop is workplace civility is not just about policies and guidelines. Without fostering a culture where kindness and respect are the norm, there is someone in your organization who cannot truly flourish. And that is not okay. As leaders, that cannot be okay with us. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's conversation. Sejal, thank you so much. I know you have an incredibly busy day. You have been
Yeah.
amazing to have here. Thank you for joining the coffee table. For all of you out there that joined, please take a minute to share this video. This is something that if we are going to get to the civility revolution, we need to put it in front of us. We need to have the difficult conversations. So thank you all so much for joining. I invite you back next week to hear number one, the special announcement that is upcoming. And number two, it is the last episode of the season of the Coffee with Rhonda show. So we'll see you all back here next week, same time, same station. And until then, take good care, everybody.